The California sun hung low over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, painting the Pacific horizon in shades of copper and flame, the kind of light that made everything look heroic or damned. Lieutenant Kira Brennan stood motionless on the firing line, a figure so small she seemed almost lost against the vast expanse of the range. 5'2" in boots, 118 pounds soaking wet, dark hair pulled back in a regulation braid, sharp green eyes that missed nothing. 26 years old, with a kind of compact, coiled strength that came from a lifetime of proving herself in spaces that didn't want her. 40 SEAL candidates watched from behind the safety line. Big men, most of them, the kind who'd been told since birth that they were warriors. They looked at Kira the way you'd look at a curiosity, something that didn't quite fit the pattern, something that probably wouldn't last. Master Chief Garrett Maddox stood 20 feet to her right, arms crossed over a chest that had seen better decades. 62 years old with silver hair cut high and tight, a scar running from his right cheekbone to his jaw, courtesy of shrapnel in Fallujah, 2006. His eyes were the pale blue of desert sky, hard as flint. 40 years in the game. Delta Force from 1985 to 2008. After that, training the next generation of shooters who thought they had what it took. He'd seen 1,000 candidates. Maybe 50 made it all the way. None of them had been women. Not yet. 2,500 yards, Maddox said, his voice carrying that particular gravel that came from years of shouting orders over gunfire. Steel plate, 18 by 24 inches. Winds running 14 miles per hour from 2 o'clock, gusting to 18. Temperatures dropping, 82 degrees now, down from 86 an hour ago. Humidity, 58%. Barometric pressure holding at 9.92. He paused, let the numbers sink in. This isn't a shot, it's a mathematical problem wrapped in chaos. Most of you won't even get the formula right, let alone make the hit. Kira said nothing, just knelt beside her rifle case, opened it with the careful precision of a surgeon prepping for a procedure that allowed zero margin for error. The rifle was beautiful in the way that lethal things often are. Accuracy International, AXMC, chassis system painted in flat dark earth, every line purpose-built for one thing, putting rounds on target at distances that defied belief. Chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, a round that could reach out past a mile and still carry enough energy to punch through an engine block. She assembled it without looking. Barrel, bolt, magazine, scope, a Nightforce ATACR, the kind of glass that costs more than most people's cars. Every movement economical, practiced, the muscle memory of 10,000 repetitions. Behind her, one of the SEAL candidates muttered something. She couldn't make out the words, but she caught the tone. Amusement, skepticism, the sound of men watching a woman do something they couldn't imagine her completing. She'd heard it before. She'd hear it again. Maddox walked to the spotting scope mounted on a tripod, lowered himself behind it with the careful movement of a man whose knees remembered every jump, every impact, every hard landing over 4 decades. He adjusted the focus, brought the distant steel plate into sharp relief. Wind's picking up, he said, gusting 19 now. You want to wait for it to settle? No, sir. Kira's voice was quiet, firm, New England accent softened by years of moving between bases, but still there in the vowels. Wind never settles, just changes direction. She settled into position behind the rifle. Prone, legs spread in a Y, left elbow under the stock, right hand on the grip, cheek pressed to the comb. The kind of position you could hold for hours if you had to, if the mission required it. The scope's reticle swam into focus, a complex pattern of lines and dots, each one representing a precise mathematical relationship between distance, gravity, and wind. At 2,500 yards, the target looked impossibly small. A sliver of dark steel against the tan backdrop of the California hills. She closed her eyes, let her breathing settle. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, controlled. Finding that space between heartbeats where the body went still, where the chaos of the world narrowed down to a single point of focus. Then she opened her eyes and started calculating. Range, she said, speaking the numbers aloud so the microphone clipped to her collar would catch them. They'd review the recording later, see where her math went wrong. If it went wrong. 2,500 yards, 7,500 feet, point 0.3 Lapua, muzzle velocity 2,900 feet per second, ballistic coefficient 0.720. Her finger traced invisible equations in the air beside the rifle. Time of flight, 3.8 seconds. Gravity drops the round 587 inches over that distance. That's 48.9 feet. 48 feet 9 inches of drop. She paused, converted the number. 22.3 minutes of angle elevation. Maddox watched through the spotting scope, his expression unreadable. He'd heard a lot of candidates talk through their calculations. Most of them got lost somewhere in the middle, started guessing, started hoping. Hope didn't put rounds on target. Wind, Kira continued, 14 miles per hour from 2 o'clock. That's not a 90-degree crosswind. That's 60 degrees off perpendicular. Crosswind component is, another pause, mental trigonometry, 12.1 miles per hour. She adjusted the turret on her scope. Mechanical clicks, each one representing a precise angular shift. At this range, with this time of flight, that crosswind pushes the round 31 inches. But that's not all. Coriolis effect. We're shooting east at this latitude, northern hemisphere. Earth's rotation moves the target 7 inches right during flight time. And spin drift, the round spinning clockwise out of the barrel, that's another 5 inches right. Behind her, the SEAL candidates had gone quiet. Even the skeptics. Because what she was describing wasn't basic marksmanship. This was physics. Applied mathematics at the edge of what was physically possible. Total wind correction, Kira said, her hand moving to the windage turret. 31 inches left for wind, -7 inches for Coriolis, -5 for spin drift, net 39 inches left. That's 3.1 minutes of angle. Maddox shifted behind the spotting scope. His jaw tightened. She'd done the math right, all of it. Most shooters forgot about Coriolis. Half of them didn't even know what spin drift was. But she'd accounted for everything, almost everything. You forgot something, he said, his voice carrying across the range. Kira didn't flinch, didn't look away from the scope. Her breathing stayed steady. In, out, between heartbeats. Temperature differential, she said. Ammunition was loaded at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Current temperature is 82, 12-degree increase. Powder burns faster in heat. Muzzle velocity increases approximately 1.7 feet per second per degree Fahrenheit. More mental math, perform faster than most people could work a calculator. 12 degrees times 1.7 equals 20.4 feet per second faster. Changes the trajectory by roughly 2 inches at this range. She paused. Negligible. Within the margin of error for wind variation. The range fell absolutely silent. Maddox stared at her back, at the small woman lying behind the rifle, and for just a moment, just a heartbeat, he saw someone else. A different shooter, a different time. Afghanistan, 2008. A man who could make these same calculations in his head, who understood that sniping wasn't about courage or testosterone or how much you could bench press. It was about thinking, about mastering the chaos. Kira's finger moved to the trigger, a light trigger, set at 2.5 pounds. You didn't pull it, you pressed it, squeezed it. Let it surprise you when it broke, so the anticipation didn't make you flinch, didn't shift the point of aim by that one crucial inch that meant the difference between a hit and a miss at half a mile. Her world narrowed to the reticle, the target, the wind on her face. Felt the wind on her cheek, a gentle push from the right. Watched the reticle settle on the target, the crosshairs dancing slightly with each breath, each pulse of blood through her carotid artery. And then everything went still. The trigger broke. The rifle roared, the sound slamming across the range like thunder. The recoil drove straight back into her shoulder, but she didn't fight it. Let the rifle do what rifles do. Her eye stayed on the scope, tracking through the recoil cycle, watching the bullet trace an invisible arc across the California afternoon. 3.8 seconds. It doesn't sound like much, but when you're waiting to see if you've made the shot of your life, when 40 skeptics are watching, when everything you've worked for hangs on whether you did the math right, 3.8 seconds is an eternity. The bullet climbed, peaked, started its long fall back toward Earth. Wind pushed it, gravity pulled it, the Earth's rotation shifted it. All those invisible forces acting on one small piece of copper-jacketed lead, trying to drag it off course, trying to make it miss. And then, clang, the sound of metal on metal, sharp and bright and unmistakable. The steel plate rang like a bell, the impact point dead center. Not close, not good enough, perfect. 2,500 yards, 25 football fields, a mile and change, with wind, with every environmental factor working against her. And she'd threaded the needle. Kira stayed in position, breath still controlled, finger still on the trigger guard. Protocol. You didn't celebrate before confirming the hit. You didn't move until your spotter called it. Maddox stared through the spotting scope, his knuckles white where they gripped the frame. He'd seen the impact. Center mass, the kind of shot that shouldn't be possible, not in these conditions, not by someone who, according to all the traditional wisdom, didn't have the upper body strength, didn't have the temperament, didn't have whatever mystical quality they like to pretend made men better at pulling triggers than women. Hit, he said, his voice rough. Center mass. The SEAL candidates erupted, some in approval, some in disbelief. The sound of assumptions being shattered, of worldviews adjusting to accommodate something they hadn't thought possible. Kira stood up slowly, calmly, like she'd just finished a routine training exercise instead of making one of the longest confirmed shots in the history of the facility. She safed the rifle, ejected the magazine, opened the bolt to show clear. Then she turned and looked at Maddox. He was already walking toward her, his gait that particular rolling stride of a man who jumped out of too many airplanes, kicked down too many doors. His face was unreadable, granite with eyes. But something had changed in those pale blue irises. Shock, maybe, or recognition. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that his shadow fell across her. Who taught you to calculate Coriolis in your head? His voice was quiet, meant only for her. The kind of question that carried weight, that meant something beyond the words themselves. My father. Maddox went very still. The kind of still that combat veterans learn when the world suddenly stops making sense, when the universe tilts sideways, and what you thought you knew turns out to be wrong. What's his name? Kira met his eyes without blinking. Colonel Marcus Brennan, Delta Force, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. She paused. You served with him, Afghanistan. Operation Sledgehammer, Helmand Province, October 2008. The color drained from Maddox's face, just leached out, like someone had opened a valve. His jaw worked, but no sound came. Behind him, the SEAL candidates were still talking, still processing what they just witnessed. None of them noticed the old instructor going pale as death. Marcus is dead. The words came out hoarse, broken. Killed October 15th, 2008. IED strike on a patrol route outside Kandahar. I was there. His voice cracked. I carried what was left of him to the medevac bird. That's what the Army told everyone, Kira said. Her voice was gentle, but it carried steel underneath. The tone of someone delivering news that was going to hurt, that couldn't be softened no matter how carefully you said it. That's what they told his wife, his daughter. That's what they told you. What are you saying? My father didn't die in an IED explosion. Kira's hands stayed loose at her sides, but her spine was rigid. Military bearing, parade ground straight. He was captured by a warlord named Victor Stanislaw, former Spetsnaz, operating as a PMC. Stanislaw held him for 6 years, tortured him, broke him, finally let him go in 2014 because by then, my father wasn't a threat anymore. Wasn't a witness who could testify about war crimes. Just a broken man with PTSD so bad he couldn't sleep without lights on, couldn't hear fireworks without hitting the ground. Maddox staggered, actually took a step back, like she'd hit him. His hand came up, pressed against his chest, and for a moment Kira thought he might be having a heart attack. His face had gone from pale to gray. 6 years. It came out as a whisper. 6 goddamn years. The Army classified it, made him sign non-disclosure agreements, threatened him with prosecution if he ever talked about what happened, said it was for national security, said if the story got out, it would compromise ongoing operations, put other soldiers at risk. Kira's voice stayed level, but her eyes blazed. They let him come home with a medical discharge and a VA rating and pills that didn't work, and they made him disappear into the system. Just another broken veteran nobody wanted to hear from. The range had gone quiet again. The SEAL candidates sensed something happening, something beyond a qualification shoot. The instructor and the candidate standing close, speaking in voices too low to hear, but the body language told a story. Shock, recognition, something old and terrible being dragged into the light. Maddox's legs folded. He sat down hard on the shooting mat. All that legendary toughness, all that granite composure, just gone. He looked old suddenly, not weathered, not experienced, old. "We looked for him," he said, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "For 3 months, every asset we had, drones, informants, signals intelligence, turned over half of Helmand province. Command finally called it off, said he was KIA, said we had to accept it." He looked up at Kira and his eyes were wet. "We had a memorial service. I gave the eulogy, talked about his courage, his sacrifice, how he died doing what he loved, serving his country. He watched it." Kira's voice stayed quiet, but each word landed like a hammer. "They made him watch. Taliban propaganda. They had him on video, showing him that memorial service, telling him his country had given up, that his brothers had moved on, that nobody was coming." Maddox made a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a groan, the noise of a man confronting the worst failure of his life. "He died 2 years ago," Kira continued. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it, 6 months from diagnosis to the end. He spent most of it in a VA hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and defeat." Jesus Christ. Maddox scrubbed his hands over his face, rough enough to hurt. Why didn't he find me? After he got back, I would have. He couldn't. Kira crouched down, bringing herself to eye level with the old soldier. The NDAs, the classification, and by the time the cancer came, he was too weak to fight anymore. All he wanted was to pass on what he knew. So he taught me. Every weekend, from the time I was 12 until the cancer took him. Range time, calculations, wind reading, stalking, everything he'd learned in 40 years of pulling triggers. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small black notebook, worn leather cover, pages yellowed with age and handling. She held it out to Maddox. He kept a journal. The whole time he was in captivity, he memorized what he wanted to say, wrote it all down after he got back. It's mostly tactical stuff, lessons learned, mistakes he made. But the last entry, she opened to a page marked with a red ribbon. He wrote it 3 days before he died. Maddox took the journal with shaking hands. His eyes found the passage. The handwriting was shaky, wandering across the page, but the words were clear. Find Garrett Maddox. Tell him it wasn't his fault. Tell him I never blamed him. Command called off the search. He followed orders. That's what soldiers do. But tell him something else. Tell him the world's changing. Tell him women can shoot just as straight as men, think just as clear, fight just as hard. Tell him not to make my mistake. Don't underestimate someone because they don't look like what you expect a warrior to look like. And tell him to teach my daughter. Teach her everything I couldn't. She's better than I ever was. She just needs someone to believe it. The journal trembled in Maddox's hands. He read it once, twice, 3 times, like he was trying to memorize every word, trying to burn it into his brain so deep he'd never forget. When he finally looked up, tears were running down his scarred face, cutting tracks through the dust in the California sun. "Why are you here?" His voice was raw. "Why now?" Kira stood up, extended her hand to help him rise. He took it, her grip was stronger than he expected, and pulled himself to his feet. "Because I made a promise." She looked out across the range, toward the distant target that she'd hit with a shot that shouldn't have been possible. "I told him I'd finish what he started, that I'd be the shooter he never got the chance to be, that I'd prove all those people wrong who said women couldn't hack it in the teams." She turned back to Maddox, and her green eyes were hard as jade. "And because he said you'd try to stop me, said you'd think the world's too dangerous, that this life breaks people, that you wouldn't want someone you cared about to end up like him. He said you'd need proof, so I gave it to you." She gestured toward the target. 2,500 yards. His best shot on record was 2,200. I just beat it. Maddox was silent for a long moment. Around them, the SEAL candidates were starting to drift away, sensing that whatever this was, it was private, personal. The kind of conversation that happened between people who'd both seen the dark side of the profession, who understood that sometimes the ghosts of the past came back wearing the faces of the next generation. "You're not just here to train," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "No, sir. There's something else going on, something beyond proving you can make the shot." Kira glanced around, making sure they were alone. Then she leaned in close, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 3 SEAL sniper teams in the last 8 months, all compromised during operations. Syria, Yemen, Iraq, 7 dead, 12 wounded. Someone's leaking their positions. Someone with access to mission planning, deployment schedules, sniper hide site coordinates. Maddox's eyes went cold. The grief burned away, replaced by something harder. Operational focus. The look of a man who'd just been handed a problem that needed solving. "And you think the leak is here, at this facility?" "I know it is." Kira's voice was flat, certain. "I'm Defense Intelligence Agency. Undercover. My cover's a trainee trying to make it through SEAL sniper school. My real job is finding the mole before the next team deploys." "Who knows? Naval Intelligence, DIA, JSOC, and now you. Why tell me?" "Because my father trusted you with his life, multiple times. You pulled him out of an ambush in 2006, covered his 6 in a firefight in Kandahar in 2007. You were his spotter on the operation where he got captured." She paused. "And because there are 4 instructors with the clearance level to access mission planning, you're one of them. I need to know if I can trust you." Maddox stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something she didn't expect. He laughed. Not a happy sound, a bitter, exhausted bark of recognition. "Marcus would have loved this, sending his daughter to investigate me, making me prove I'm still worth a damn." He shook his head. "Yeah, you can trust me, but Lieutenant, if I'm one of 4 suspects, you've got 3 others to worry about, and at least one of them is dirty enough to get SEALs killed." "I know." Kira picked up her rifle, started breaking it down with the same methodical precision she'd used to assemble it. "That's why I need your help. You know these men. You've worked with them for years. You'll see things I can't." "What's the timeline?" 3 weeks. SEAL Team 5 deploys to Mosul on the 23rd. If we haven't found the leak by then, more men die. Maddox watched her pack the rifle away, every movement efficient, professional. Marcus Brennan's daughter. The family resemblance wasn't in her face. She must have taken after her mother there. But the way she moved, the way she thought, the way she approached an impossible problem and broke it down into solvable components, that was pure Marcus. "All right," he said. "We've got 3 weeks to catch a traitor. And in the meantime, you're going to train like everyone else. Can't blow your cover." "No, sir." "Which means tomorrow morning, 0530, you're going to run the obstacle course with the rest of the candidates. Then fieldcraft training, then stalking exercises." He paused. "And I'm going to push you twice as hard as anyone else, because that's what they'll expect." The old instructor who doesn't believe women belong in the teams, giving the female candidate hell. Kira smiled. It was a small, tight expression, but genuine. "My father warned me you'd do that." "Did he warn you I'd make you wish you'd picked a different career?" "He said if your training didn't make me want to quit, then his training wasn't hard enough." Maddox laughed again, and this time there was something close to warmth in it. "All right then, Lieutenant, let's get to work. We've got a mole to catch and a legacy to honor." He started to walk away, then stopped, turned back. "That shot," he said, 2,500 yards first round. In these conditions, that's not just skill, that's not just training, that's something you're born with, a gift." His pale eyes held hers. "Your father had it, best natural shooter I ever saw, and I've seen a lot." "And me?" Kira asked quietly. Maddox looked at her for a long moment. This small woman with the dark hair and the green eyes, and the quiet competence that reminded him so much of a friend he'd thought was dead. A friend he'd failed. A friend whose daughter was giving him a chance at redemption he didn't deserve. "You're better," he said simply. "Marcus would be proud. Hell, he is proud, wherever he is now." Then he walked away across the range, leaving Kira alone with her rifle and her mission and the lengthening shadows of a California afternoon. She looked down at her father's journal, still in her hand, opened it to that last page, read his words one more time. "She's better than I ever was. She just needs someone to believe it." "I'll make you proud, Dad," she whispered to the empty air. "I promise." Then she packed up her gear and headed for the barracks, ready for whatever came next. The sun set over Coronado, painting the world in shades of gold and blood. Somewhere out there, a traitor was planning the next leak, the next ambush, the next set of American casualties. But now they had something they didn't know about, a sniper who could make impossible shots, and an old warrior looking for redemption. 3 weeks to catch a killer. The hunt had begun. The next morning came early and cold. 0530, the California coast still wrapped in fog that rolled in off the Pacific like smoke from a battlefield. Kira stood in formation with 42 SEAL candidates, all of them men, most of them 6 inches taller and 80 pounds heavier. The obstacle course stretched out before them like a medieval torture device designed by someone who hated the human body. Maddox walked the line, his boots crunching on gravel, his face carved from stone in the pre-dawn light. 2 miles, he said, his voice carrying across the compound. Over, under, and through every obstacle. The standard is 14 minutes. Most of you won't make it. Some of you will quit halfway through. And one of you, his eyes flicked to Kira for just a fraction of a second, will probably break something trying to prove a point. He blew the whistle. The candidates exploded forward like racehorses from the gate. Kira went with them, her shorter legs churning, arms pumping. The first obstacle was a wall. 12 feet of rough wood that required upper body strength she technically didn't have the same amount of as the men around her. But she'd learned years ago that technique beats strength. Always had, always would. She hit the wall at speed, planted 1 foot halfway up, grabbed the top edge, and used momentum to swing her leg over. dropped to the other side while bigger men were still struggling to muscle their way up. Behind the morning fog, watching from the instructor's tower, 3 men stood with coffee and clipboards. Lieutenant Commander Dane Ashford, tall and square-jawed, with the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance. Senior Chief Theo Braddock, quieter, older, carrying the weight of too many deployments in the set of his shoulders. Warrant Officer Pierce Sullivan, thin and watchful, with eyes that never seemed to blink. "She's fast," Ashford said, watching Kira navigate the rope climb with a grace that made it look easy. "I'll give her that." "Fast doesn't matter when the bullets start flying," Braddock replied. He had a voice like gravel in a blender. "She's what, 120 pounds? First time she has to carry a wounded SEAL, she'll fold." Sullivan said nothing, just watched, just calculated. Kira finished the course in 13 minutes and 47 seconds. Not the fastest time, but well under the standard and faster than 23 of the male candidates. She wasn't even breathing hard. Maddox nodded once. No praise, no acknowledgement beyond that single dip of his chin. But she saw something in his eyes. Approval. The kind you earned, not the kind you got for showing up. The morning progressed. Fieldcraft training in the hills east of Coronado. Maddox taught concealment, the art of becoming part of the landscape. He demonstrated how to construct a hide site, how to read terrain for dead space and cover, how to move without creating a signature that could be spotted from 1,000 yards away. Kira absorbed it all. Asked questions that showed she already understood the basics, was hungry for the advanced concepts. The other candidates watched with grudging respect. She wasn't just keeping up, she was excelling. But training was the easy part, the cover. The real mission happened after hours. That night, Kira waited until the barracks went quiet. 2,300 hours, when exhausted candidates were dead to the world, when the watch rotation changed and there was a 4-minute window of reduced coverage. She slipped out wearing dark clothing, no reflective patches, face covered, moved through the compound like smoke. Her father had taught her this too, how to be invisible, how to move through a facility where you weren't supposed to be. The equipment room was locked, but locks were just mechanisms. Mechanical problems with mechanical solutions. She pulled a pick set from her pocket, technically illegal for her to have, definitely illegal for her to use. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. Inside, the room smelled like gun oil and cordite, racks of rifles, cases of ammunition, cleaning supplies, range cards with elevation data for various distances and conditions. Everything a sniper needed to do the job. She started searching, methodical, careful, leaving no trace of her presence. Checking serial numbers on weapons against the inventory logs. Looking for discrepancies, gaps, anything that didn't add up. She found it in the ammunition locker. 50 rounds of .338 Lapua Magnum, missing from inventory but not logged out. According to the records, this ammo should still be here, but the box was empty. Someone had taken it and not reported it. Why would an instructor need to steal ammunition? They had unlimited access through legitimate channels. Unless they needed ammunition that couldn't be traced back to them. Kira photographed the empty box with her phone. No flash, just the low-light camera that captured serial numbers and lot codes. Evidence, the kind that would matter later. Then she heard it. Footsteps. In the hallway. Coming toward the equipment room. She moved fast. Killed the light from her phone. Pressed herself into the shadow behind a rack of M4 carbines. Controlled her breathing. Became part of the darkness. The door opened. A figure entered, silhouetted against the hallway light. Male, 6 feet tall, moving with the easy confidence of someone who belonged here, someone who had access. Lieutenant Commander Dane Ashford. He went straight to the ammunition locker, opened it with his own key, not bothering to pick the lock. He pulled out 2 boxes of .338 Lapua, checked the lot numbers, then tucked them under his arm. Kira's mind raced. Ashford had legitimate access, But why was he here at 23:30 hours? Why not check out ammo during regular working hours? Ashford turned to leave. As he did, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read something on the screen, typed a quick reply. The phone's glow illuminated his face. He was smiling. The kind of smile that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with satisfaction. Then he left, closing the door behind him. Kira waited, counted to 100, then slipped out after him, keeping to the shadows, maintaining distance. Basic surveillance. Following without being seen. Ashford walked across the compound to the admin building, used a key card to access a secure area. Kira couldn't follow him there without blowing her cover, but she didn't need to. She'd seen enough. She headed back to the barracks, mind working through the implications. Ashford had access to ammunition, had access to mission planning, had the clearance level to see deployment schedules, target packages, sniper positions. But having access didn't make him the mole. Half the instructors had the same access. She needed more. She needed proof. The next day brought more training, stalking exercises. The candidates had to move 300 yards across open terrain without being spotted by instructors equipped with binoculars. Most failed. The human eye was remarkably good at detecting movement, at spotting patterns that didn't belong. Kira succeeded. Took her 47 minutes, moving 1 meter every 3 minutes, adjusting her ghillie suit to match the vegetation as she went. When she finally reached the objective, Maddox was waiting. "Not bad," he said. Then, quieter, when the other instructors were out of earshot. "Anything?" "Ashford," she murmured, pretending to adjust her rifle sling. "Equipment room. Last night, taking ammo that wasn't logged." Maddox's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. "That's not proof. Could be a dozen reasons." "I know, but it's a start." Over the next week, Kira settled into the rhythm of the training. By day, she was just another candidate, pushing herself through physical tests and technical exercises, proving she belonged. By night, she investigated, checking computer logs, monitoring communications, building a pattern. She found more anomalies, training schedules accessed at odd hours, encrypted files transferred to unknown external addresses. Nothing concrete enough for an arrest, but enough to build a case. And every trail led back to the same place, Ashford. But she needed more than circumstantial evidence. She needed to catch him in the act. So she set a trap. Working with Maddox, she created a fake mission brief, classified, detailed. SEAL Team 5 deploying to Mosul in 72 hours. Target package included exact coordinates for a sniper hide site, patrol routes, extraction plans. Everything an enemy would need to set up an ambush. They fed it into the system, then waited to see who took the bait. 2 days later, Kira was called into Captain Helena Voss's office. The DIA handler sat behind a desk covered in satellite photos and intelligence reports, her face grim. "Your bait worked," Voss said without preamble. "The fake intel was accessed yesterday at 0300 hours from Maddox's computer terminal." Kira felt her stomach drop. "What?" "Someone logged into Maddox's account, downloaded the mission brief, transmitted it via encrypted satellite uplink to an unknown receiver. The transmission was traced to a location in eastern Syria, ISIS-controlled territory." "No," Kira shook her head. "Not Maddox. It can't be." Voss pushed a printout across the desk. Computer logs, access times, user credentials, all pointing to one person, Master Chief Garrett Maddox. "I know he was your father's friend," Voss said quietly, "but the evidence is clear. Either he's the mole, or someone is using his credentials. Either way, he's compromised." Kira stared at the logs. Her mind refused to accept it. Maddox had served with her father, had mourned him, had carried what he thought was her father's body to a helicopter. Men like that didn't become traitors, didn't sell out their brothers, unless 6 years of guilt had broken something inside him, unless the weight of leaving Marcus Brennan behind had twisted him into something else. No, she wouldn't believe it, not without confronting him directly. That night, she found Maddox in the armory. He was alone, cleaning weapons, the repetitive task that old soldiers used to quiet their minds. She locked the door behind her. "It's not you," she said without preamble. Maddox looked up, saw something in her face. "What happened?" She told him. The bait, the transmission, the logs showing his account accessing the classified brief and sending it to Syria. Maddox froze. Then he set down the rifle he'd been cleaning, stood, and walked to the computer terminal mounted on the wall. Logged in, pulled up his access history. "Son of a bitch," he breathed. "What?" "Look at the timestamps. I was accessing training records at 0245, logged out at 0253, but according to this, my account accessed the mission brief at 0300, 7 minutes after I logged out. Someone cloned your credentials. Not just cloned, they waited until I logged out, then used my account immediately after. Knew my routine. Knew I'd be in the system doing admin work in the middle of the night because that's when I can't sleep." His jaw tightened. "Someone's been watching me, learning my patterns." Kira pulled out her phone, brought up the photos she'd taken over the past week. Security footage, computer logs, access records. She spread them out on the workbench. 3 people had opportunity, she said. Ashford, Braddock, Sullivan. All of them have been in the admin building during your typical access windows. All of them have the technical skill to clone credentials. But only one of them has been acting strange. Maddox pointed at one of the photos. Ashford, entering the admin building at 0200 hours. Why would he be there that early unless he was waiting for me to log out? Could be legitimate work. Could be, or he could be our mole. They stared at each other, both thinking the same thing. They needed definitive proof, and there was only one way to get it. "The Mosul deployment," Kira said slowly. "It's real now. Team 5 leaves in 48 hours. If we go with them and the intel leaks again, we'll be walking into an ambush, but we'll also be able to catch whoever set it up." She met his eyes. "I'm going, with or without authorization." Maddox was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Your father would have done the same thing, walked into hell to protect his team." He picked up his rifle, checked the action. "I'm coming with you. You're not active duty anymore. Neither is a son of a bitch who's getting SEALs killed, and I've still got enough friends in JSOC to get myself attached to the deployment as an observer." His smile was cold. "Besides, someone needs to be your spotter. This could end your career." "Lieutenant, I'm 62 years old. My career's already over. Now I'm just trying to make sure the next generation survives long enough to have careers of their own." Kira felt something tight in her chest loosen. Not trust, exactly. She'd learned the hard way that trust was a luxury intelligence operatives couldn't afford. But something close to it. Respect. Recognition. The knowledge that she wasn't alone in this. 48 hours, she said. "We prep like it's a real mission, because if this goes wrong, it will be." "And Ashford?" "We watch him every second. If he makes a move, we'll see it." The next 2 days blurred together. Training intensified. Final qualifications. Equipment checks. The SEAL Team 5 operators going through their pre-deployment routines with the mechanical efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. Kira stayed close to Ashford, watching for any sign that he was communicating with outside contacts. But he was careful, professional. If he was the mole, he was good at hiding it. Too good. The night before deployment, Kira couldn't sleep. She sat in the barracks, cleaning her rifle for the 3rd time, checking her gear obsessively, making sure everything was perfect, because perfection was the only thing standing between her and a bullet in the dark. Someone knocked on the doorframe. She looked up. Maddox stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, sat down on the bunk across from her. "Your father used to do the same thing," he said quietly. "Night before a mission, clean his weapons until his hands moved on autopilot, said it helped him think. Did it work? Never asked, but he always came back alive, so I figured it must have. Maddox sipped his coffee. You scared? Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's the ones who aren't scared that get killed. They sat in silence for a while. Two snipers, two generations, connected by a dead man's legacy and the mission that might kill them both. Tomorrow, Maddox said finally, when we're out there, things might get bad. If they do, if it comes down to it, you follow your training. You make the shot. You don't worry about me. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. You're 26 with years ahead of you. I'm 62 and I've had mine. He met her eyes. But I can still spot. I can still call wind. And I can still make sure Marcus Brennan's daughter gets home alive. Kira wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she didn't need protecting, that she could handle herself. But the words stuck in her throat. Because the truth was, she was 26 years old and about to walk into a combat zone where someone wanted her dead. And having a 62-year-old Delta Force veteran watching her back didn't sound like a liability. It sounded like the only thing that might keep her alive. Thank you, she said quietly. Maddox nodded, set down his coffee cup, stood to leave, then paused. Marcus told me once that the hardest part of being a sniper wasn't the shooting. It was the waiting. The hours lying in position, watching, knowing that when the moment came, you'd have one chance to get it right. One chance to make the shot that mattered. He looked at her. Tomorrow that moment's coming, and when it does, you'll be ready. Because you're his daughter, and he taught you well. Then he was gone, leaving Kira alone with her rifle and her fear and the knowledge that in 12 hours, everything would change. The helicopters left at 0400. Two MH-60 Blackhawks, blacked out, flying low over the desert. Inside, SEAL Team 5 sat in their combat gear, faces painted, weapons ready. Kira sat near the door, feeling the vibration of the rotors through her boots, watching the darkness blur past below. Maddox sat across from her. Their eyes met, no words needed. They were going to war. And somewhere out there, in the darkness, a traitor was waiting to spring his trap. The desert rushed past below, the helicopters flew on, and Kira Brennan gripped her rifle and thought about her father, about all the missions he'd flown into hostile territory, about all the times he'd come back when the odds said he shouldn't. She thought about the promise she'd made at his grave, and she promised herself that tomorrow, when the bullets started flying, she'd keep it, no matter what it cost. The Iraqi desert at night was a different kind of darkness, not the soft black of a California evening, but something absolute, something that pressed against your eyes like a physical weight. The helicopters dropped them 8 kilometers from the target, rotors beating the air into submission, and then they were gone, swallowed back into the sky, leaving 12 Americans alone in hostile territory. Kira adjusted the weight of her pack. 60 pounds of gear, rifle, ammunition, water, communications equipment, survival gear, everything she'd need for the next 72 hours. Around her, the SEAL operators moved with practiced silence, hand signals flickering in the darkness, night vision painting the world in shades of green. Maddox moved beside her, older, slower, but still capable, still dangerous. His breathing was controlled, steady. 40 years of doing this had taught him how to conserve energy, how to pace himself for the long haul. They moved in single file through the darkness, point man scanning ahead with night vision and thermal optics. Kira in the middle of the formation, Maddox right behind her. The terrain was rocky, uneven, dotted with scrub brush that caught at their clothing. Every 50 meters they stopped, went prone, listened, waited for any sign that they'd been detected. Nothing. Just wind and darkness, and the distant bark of a dog somewhere in the city ahead. Mosul rose on the horizon like a collection of broken teeth, buildings shattered by years of war, streets reduced to rubble. The kind of urban decay that happened when armies fought over the same ground again and again, when infrastructure collapsed and nobody had the resources or the will to rebuild. Their target was a compound on the eastern edge of the city. According to intelligence, an ISIS commander used it as a safe house. High-value target, someone who'd been coordinating attacks across 3 provinces, someone whose death would disrupt operations for months. According to the fake intelligence Kira and Maddox had planted, there was a perfect sniper hide site 1,200 yards from the compound. An abandoned building, 3 stories, with clear lines of sight and multiple egress routes. If the information had leaked, that building would be a killing box. They approached from the south, moving through rubble-strewn streets where every shadow could hide an enemy, where every window could conceal a rifle. The SEAL team leader, a lieutenant named Carver, held up a fist. The formation stopped. Carver pointed at Kira, then at Maddox, then at the target building. His meaning was clear. You two, that's your position. The rest of us will set up security and prepare for the assault. Kira nodded. She and Maddox separated from the main group, moving toward the building with exaggerated care. Every footstep calculated, every movement deliberate. In urban terrain, noise discipline was the difference between success and a bullet in the back. They reached the building. 3 stories of concrete and rebar, half the roof missing, walls pockmarked with bullet holes. Kira went first, rifle up, clearing each room with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in training and never once in combat. The real thing was different. The adrenaline was sharper. The fear was deeper. Every corner she turned could be her last. But the building was empty, just rubble and the smell of cordite and old fires. They climbed to the 3rd floor, found a room with a window facing the target compound. Perfect fields of fire, perfect sightlines, too perfect. Maddox knelt beside the window, pulled out a small electronic device, swept the room for listening devices, cameras, anything that would indicate someone had prepared this position. The device stayed silent, clean. But that didn't mean they were safe. Kira set up her rifle. The AXMC had made the trip intact, packed in a hard case designed to survive helicopter insertions and rough handling. She assembled it by feel, muscle memory taking over while her eyes scanned the room. The approach routes, the dead space where threats could hide. Maddox set up the spotting scope, high-powered optics that could see details at ranges where the naked eye saw nothing. He glassed the target compound methodically, taking his time, building a mental map of guard positions, patrol patterns, potential threats. 4 guards visible, he murmured, 2 on the roof, 2 at the main gate, AK-47s, no body armor, cigarette break rotation every 30 minutes. Kira settled in behind her rifle, found the target building in her scope. 1,200 yards, an easy shot in daylight, on a range, with no stress and unlimited time. Here, in the dark, with lives on the line, it was different. She checked her data card. Range, temperature, humidity, wind. All the variables that would affect the shot. But something felt wrong. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. That primitive warning system that had kept humans alive for millennia. The one that said, predator nearby, danger close, get ready to run. Maddox, she whispered, something's off. He felt it too. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his hand drifted toward his sidearm. Guard pattern's wrong, he said after a moment. They're rotating every 30 minutes. That's textbook, professional. ISIS fighters don't do textbook. They do chaos, inconsistency. Unless someone told them to tighten up their security, unless someone told them we were coming. They looked at each other in the darkness, both thinking the same thing. The leak had worked. The trap was set, and they'd walked right into it. Kira's radio crackled. Carver's voice, distorted by encryption. Overwatch, this is ground element, in position, standing by for your signal. She keyed her mic. Ground element, Overwatch, Advise you hold position. Something's wrong with the target area. A pause, then, define wrong. Guard rotation too professional. Feels like a prepared ambush. Another pause, longer this time. Then Carver's voice came back, and there was steel in it. Copy that, Overwatch. But we've got eyes on the target. He's in the building. We have a limited window. Request permission to proceed. Kira looked at Maddox. He shook his head fractionally. Don't do it. Pull back. Live to fight another day. But if they pulled back, the mole would know the trap had failed, would go deeper underground, would be impossible to catch, and more SEALs would die. She keyed her mic again. Ground element, proceed with caution. Overwatch has you covered. Copy. Moving in 2 minutes. Maddox gripped her shoulder. This is a mistake. I know, but it's the only way to flush him out. Flush who out? We still don't have proof it's Ashford. Then we're about to get it. The next 2 minutes stretched like hours. Kira watched through her scope as the SEAL element moved into position. Shadows flowing through shadows, barely visible even with night vision. They were good, the best America had. But good didn't matter if someone had sold their positions to the enemy. Carver's voice. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The explosion lit up the night like a miniature sun. Not from the target compound, from behind the SEAL team. A daisy chain of IEDs buried in the street, triggered remotely, timed perfectly to catch the operators in the kill zone. Kira's scope showed her everything in horrifying detail. Bodies thrown through the air, the flash of secondary explosions. The SEAL team scattered, some down, some scrambling for cover. Ambush! Carver's voice, ragged with pain. We're hit! Multiple casualties! Then the real attack began. Muzzle flashes erupted from buildings on 3 sides. Automatic weapons fire. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with the heavier bark of machine guns. The SEALs were pinned down, caught in a crossfire taking casualties. Someone had known exactly where they'd be, exactly when they'd breach, exactly how to kill them most efficiently. Maddox was already on the radio, calling for emergency extraction, medical evacuation, any support they could get. But help was 20 minutes away, minimum. The SEAL team didn't have 20 minutes. Kira's training took over. The fear, the shock, the horror of watching men die, all of it compressed down into a single point of focus. The scope, the target, the shot. She found the first machine gun position, 800 yards, elevated, pouring fire into the trapped SEAL team. 2 men operating a PKM, the Russian machine gun that had killed more Americans than any other weapon in the Middle East. Range, wind, elevation. The calculations flowed through her mind like water, automatic as breathing. She fired. The machine gunner's head snapped back. He collapsed. His partner looked around wildly, trying to figure out where the shot came from. Kira cycled the bolt, chambered a new round, fired again. 2 seconds between shots. The partner dropped. Second position, 3 o'clock, 900 yards, Maddox called, spotting targets faster than she could service them. She swung the rifle, found the position, made the adjustments, fired. A fighter with an AK-47 crumpled, fired again, another down. The ambush was collapsing. Without the machine gun suppressing them, the SEALs could move, could return fire, could fight their way to cover. But they were still taking casualties, still bleeding. And then Kira saw him. Through her scope at the edge of the compound, a figure in tactical gear that didn't match ISIS's usual setup. American plate carrier, American weapons. Moving with the confidence of someone who'd trained at Coronado, who knew SEAL tactics inside and out. Lieutenant Commander Dane Ashford. He wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't undercover. He was fighting alongside the enemy, directing their fire, pointing out where the SEALs were trapped. Maddox saw him at the same moment. Son of a bitch, it really was him. Ashford was using a SEAL operator as a human shield, a wounded man he'd grabbed during the chaos. Holding him upright, using him as cover while he fired at the rest of the team. "I don't have a shot," Kira said, her voice tight. "He's got a hostage. Then we wait for an opening. We don't have time." She could see the SEAL team's position collapsing, could see more fighters moving in from the north. In 5 minutes, they'd be overrun. In 10, they'd all be dead. Ashford shifted, adjusting his grip on the hostage. For just a moment, there was a gap. 4 inches between the hostage's shoulder and Ashford's head. 4 inches of space. At 600 yards, with wind, with a moving target, an impossible shot, the kind of shot her father had been famous for. The kind that other snipers talked about in whispered tones, that seemed more like legend than reality. She heard her father's voice in her head. "Sometimes courage means taking the shot no one else will. Trust your training." "I can make it," she said. Maddox looked through the spotting scope, saw the gap she was talking about, understood what she was proposing. "Kira, I know what it is. 4 inches at 600 yards, 1 degree of error, and you kill our own man." "Then I won't have any error." She settled in behind the rifle, found the gap in her scope. Ashford's head, partially obscured by the hostage's shoulder, the smallest of targets. The margin for error measured in millimeters. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The chaos of the battlefield, the gunfire, the screams, the explosions, all of it faded into background noise. There was only the scope, only the target. Time slowed to a crawl. Her finger found the trigger. Wind, 6 miles per hour from 10 o'clock. She adjusted. Range, 612 yards. She adjusted. Target movement. Ashford was shifting, nervous, looking for threats. She tracked him, predicted his pattern. The crosshairs settled on that 4-inch gap. She exhaled halfway, held it. The space between heartbeats. The trigger broke. The rifle roared. Your old man taught you that one, didn't he? Threading a needle at 600 yards. But there was no time to celebrate. The ambush was broken, but there were still hostiles, still threats. Kira kept shooting, working through targets with mechanical precision. 7 down, 9, 12. Every round a hit, every hit a life saved. The enemy broke, started pulling back. The SEALs seized the initiative, pushed forward, secured the wounded. Carver's voice on the radio, calling for medevac, reporting casualties. 2 dead, 4 wounded. But it could have been worse. Should have been worse. Would have been worse without the sniper in the 3rd-floor window who'd turned the ambush around. Extraction helicopters arrived 18 minutes later. Black Hawks with door gunners laying down suppressing fire, landing in the street to load wounded. Kira and Maddox displaced from their position, moving back to the landing zone with the rest of the team. As they loaded onto the helicopter, Carver grabbed Kira's arm. His face was streaked with blood and dust, his eyes hollow with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who just survived what shouldn't be survivable. "That shot," he said, shouting over the rotor noise. "The one that saved Patterson. I've never seen anything like it." Kira just nodded, too tired to speak, too drained to process what she'd just done. The helicopter lifted off, leaving Mosul behind, leaving the ambush behind, leaving Ashford's body behind. But the mission wasn't over. Not yet. Back at Coronado, 72 hours later, Kira stood in a secure conference room with Captain Voss, Maddox, and 2 Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents. On the table between them, evidence bags containing Ashford's encrypted communications, financial records showing payments from a company called Blackstone Security, transcripts of his conversations with a handler. The handler's name was Viktor Stanislaw, former Russian Spetsnaz, current CEO of a private military contractor that sold intelligence to the highest bidder. The same Viktor Stanislaw who'd held Marcus Brennan prisoner for 6 years. Voss pushed a photograph across the table. Stanislaw, 58 years old, gray hair, cold eyes, standing outside a villa in Montenegro. a place where extradition treaties didn't reach, where money and connections could buy immunity from justice. Ashford was just an asset, Voss said. Stanislaw's the real target. He's been running agents inside U.S. military facilities for a decade, selling intel to ISIS, to Russian intelligence, to Chinese MSS. 7 SEAL deaths in 8 months. 32 other casualties we can trace back to leaked information. And we can't touch him. Can't legally, Kira said quietly. Voss looked at her for a long moment. I didn't hear that. Then I'll say it again. We can't touch him legally. Lieutenant, you're suggesting an unsanctioned operation in a foreign country. Assassination of a foreign national. That's murder. That's justice. The room went quiet. The NCIS agents looked uncomfortable. This was the line. The place where legitimate military operations ended and something else began. Something darker. Maddox spoke up. Stanislaw tortured an American officer for 6 years, broke him so thoroughly that when he finally came home, he was a ghost. Let the cancer kill him because he didn't have anything left to live for. His voice was rough. That man was my brother. He saved my life 3 times. I owed him a debt I couldn't repay while he was alive. But his daughter's giving me a chance to pay it now. Voss looked at Maddox, then at Kira, then at the photograph of Stanislaw. If someone were to conduct an unsanctioned operation, she said carefully, DIA would have no knowledge of it, no support, no extraction if things went wrong. You'd be completely on your own. Understood, Kira said. And if you were caught, the U.S. government would disavow any connection. You'd be tried in a Montenegrin court, spend the rest of your life in a foreign prison. I understand that too, Voss stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Pacific. When she turned back, her face was stone. Then I suggest you take some leave, Lieutenant. You've earned it after what happened in Mosul. She paused. And Master Chief, your terminal leave paperwork came through. You're officially retired as of today. What you do with your retirement is your business. She left the room. The NCI agents followed, taking their evidence bags and their official stance with them, leaving Kira and Maddox alone. You don't have to do this, Kira said. This is my fight. No, Maddox's voice was firm. It's our fight, Marcus's fight, and we're going to finish it. Montenegro was beautiful in a way that felt like an insult. Azure seas, white beaches, mountains rising green and pristine. The kind of place where wealthy people came to forget that the world had ugly corners. Stanislaw's villa sat on a hillside overlooking the Adriatic. Fortified, guards, security systems, but not impenetrable. Nothing was impenetrable if you were willing to risk everything. They infiltrated by sea, a 3-kilometer swim with closed-circuit rebreathers, approaching from the water where Stanislaw's security was weakest. Kira and Maddox, plus 3 other volunteers, SEAL operators who'd lost teammates to leaked intelligence, who wanted justice even if it meant throwing away their careers. 5 people against 20 security personnel, former special forces from half a dozen countries, all of them experienced, all of them dangerous. But none of them were expecting ghosts. They came ashore at 0200, moved up the hillside in darkness, eliminated 2 perimeter guards silently, knives and garrots. The old ways, the quiet ways, reached the overwatch position 1,600 yards from the villa. Kira set up her rifle. Maddox set up the spotting scope. Just like Coronado, just like Mosul, except this time there were no rules, no oversight, no safety net, just 2 snipers and a score to settle. They waited. 6 hours. Sunrise painting the sea golden pink. Beautiful and terrible. Stanislaw emerged onto his balcony at 0700. Bulletproof glass protecting him. 2 bodyguards flanking him. A man who thought money and walls could keep him safe from his past. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, reached for the door handle to step outside. He's going to open the door, Kira murmured. Smokers are creatures of habit. He'll want fresh air. That intel's 10 years old, Maddox said. He could have quit. Addicts don't change. The door opened. Stanislaus stepped out onto the balcony, cigarette in hand, surveying his little kingdom. A man comfortable in his power, in his untouchability. Kira calculated the shot. 1,647 yards. Wind 11 miles per hour, gusting to 15 from 1 o'clock. Light rain falling, affecting bullet trajectory. Target moving slowly across the balcony. Maddox called the corrections. Elevation 18.7 MOA. Windage 2.4 left. Lead him 8 inches. Wind's too variable, Kira said. I'd have to guess. Then don't guess. Feel it. She closed her eyes, felt the wind on her face, the same wind that was pushing the bullet. Her father had taught her this. When you can't calculate perfection, trust your instincts. Trust what your body knows that your mind can't quantify. She opened her eyes, made the final adjustments, found Stanislaus in her scope, a man who'd tortured her father, who'd broken him, who'd sold American lives for profit. She found that space between heartbeats. Fired. 3.9 seconds. Through the scope, she watched Victor Stanislaus' head snap back, watched him collapse on his balcony, cigarette falling from his fingers. Watched justice arrive at 2,900 feet per second. Maddox whispered, "Your father would be proud." They displaced immediately, moving fast through the mountains, hearing alarm bells behind them, knowing security would be swarming. But they had a head start, had the terrain, had 40 combined years of experience in staying alive when the world wanted them dead. They reached the extraction point 12 hours later. A fishing boat crewed by people who didn't ask questions and didn't care about passports. 3 days later, they were back in the United States. Different identities, different routes, careful not to leave trails. 2 weeks after that, Kira stood at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60, where her father was buried. Fresh flowers on the grave, an American flag. Maddox stood beside her. "It's done," she said quietly. "Stanislaus dead. The leak's closed. 7 SEALs can rest easy." She knelt down, placed her sniper qualification badge on the grave. The metal gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Flint says I shoot like you, Dad. I think that's the best compliment I've ever gotten." Maddox cleared his throat. "He saved my life 3 times. Afghanistan. I looked for him when he got captured, but not hard enough. Command called it off and I listened. I should have kept searching." "He didn't blame you." Kira pulled out her father's journal, opened it to a page near the end. He wrote, "Tell Flint it's not his fault. He's a good man. I'd serve with him again." Maddox's eyes filled with tears. "He wrote that? 10 years ago. He forgave you long before you forgave yourself." They stood in silence for a while, 2 warriors at a grave, paying respects to a third. The sun moved across the sky. The wind rustled the trees. Finally, Maddox spoke. "JSOC called. They want to offer you a position, sniper instructor, teaching the next generation." "What did you tell them?" "That I'd ask you." He paused. "But I already know what Marcus would want. He'd want you to pass on what you've learned. Make sure his death, make sure all those deaths meant something." Kira looked at the gravestone, at her father's name carved in marble, at the dates that bracketed a life of service and sacrifice. "Then that's what I'll do." She stood, brushed dirt from her knees. "But I have one condition." "What's that?" "You teach alongside me. The next generation needs to learn from someone who's been there. Who knows what it costs?" Maddox smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Deal." They saluted the grave together, sharp, crisp, military precision. "Mission complete, Dad," Kira said softly. "You can rest now." As they walked away from the grave, Maddox spoke. "He was right, you know. In his journal, you are better than he was. I had a good teacher. You had too." He glanced at her. "And someday you'll be teaching someone else, passing on what we taught you. That's the real legacy. Not the shots we made, the lives we saved, the students we trained. They reached the cemetery gates. Beyond them, the world waited. A world that still needed warriors, still needed people willing to stand between the innocent and the dark. Think they'll ever find out? Kira asked. About Montenegro? Probably not. Stanislaw had a lot of enemies. Could have been anyone. Maddox shrugged. But even if they do, even if we end up in prison, it was worth it. Yeah, Kira said, looking back one last time at the rows of white headstones, at the price paid for freedom. It was. They walked out together into the afternoon sun, mentor and student, old warrior and young, carrying on the legacy of a man who'd taught them both what it meant to be a sniper. Not just the shooting, not just the tactics, but the courage to take impossible shots, the dedication to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, the willingness to pay whatever price justice demanded. Marcus Brennan's war was over, but his daughter's had just begun, and she'd learned from the best.